The suggestion by Musalia that the Constitution of Kenya be amended via an extra ballot paper should not go on unopposed. It doesn't make sense. First of all, if we are to do it together with the 2027 general election, when will it be implemented? 2, 3, 4, or even 5 years down the lane? Of what use will it be? Because he's saying that it is to avoid a constitutional problem. Now, supposing we do the 2027 general election and we have an extra ballot which says we should have the prime minister and we should have the leader of the majority in parliament. Then when is it implemented? Is it in 2028, 2029 or something like that? I also want to comment on the boundary delimitation. Boundary delimitation. Who said that an increase of MP every 8 to 12 years would solve the issues of Kenyans? One day we will end up with hundreds of MPs and it will take 6 weeks for each and every MP to comment on a topic. I remember when I started voting in 1979, we had 100 and something MPs. Now we have 5 times that. Suppose today we have 1,000 MPs and each one is given each one is given half an hour to comment on a topic. All of them comments. How long will it take? So our problem is not to increase the number of constituencies and so on. Actually, America determined its constituencies over 200 years ago, and the population is more than 200 times what it was, but still they have the same number of MPs. Things such as CDF should be dished or out depending on population. If your constituency has thrice the population of my constituency, then the CDF should reflect that. And so that if you are representing a constituency with three times my people, then you should get CDF that is 3 times what my constituents get. Another thing that the parliament should do is to return the school bursary to schools. Should return the school bursaries to school. During my time, school bursaries were in school. The teachers usually take the 10 o'clock, 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. tea. It is during that time when teachers discuss. They talk of Raphael Saya. Let's say a biology teacher starts by saying, Raphael Saya is very good in biology, but he comes from a poor family. Kiswahili teacher says, and then in that way they are talking in the staff room, they discover that the so-called Raphael Saya is an all-rounder, but comes from a poor family. Then they will tell the head teacher or the principal that they have discovered a bright student from a poor family. So the principal, being a secretary to the board of management, would forward the name to the board of management. And this is what used to happen. 10% of the school fees was being paid for by bursary. And again, it could be given depending on circumstances. For example, they would see there is a school where there are 2 or 3 students with a problem. They'll be paid everything and something will remain. Or there could be many and all of them deserving. So they would look at whatever they have and they will look at the demand and then divide on that. But today, the bursary that is given by CDF is fixed. It's fixed. You go to a constituency, every student gets the same amount, but we'll come to that. Another thing that Parliament should do is to return the school bursary to school. That one I've said, or better still, reduce the fees. Reduce the fees. On one hand, the whole amount of bursary surpasses the school capitation. For example, CDF bursary money, if you collect all the money that is set aside for CDF Kenya-wide, and you take that amount and take it to the Ministry of Education, I'm telling you, it could reach a time. We are told that some schools are supposed to pay 50,000. You'll find that the schools which a student is supposed to pay 50,000, they'll end up paying, everybody will be paying 20,000. There is corruption there. Because how can money be given to CDF for bursary, and you find that that money, okay, it ends up in school, but how does it end in school? If, for example, we were to sit down and say, all the boarding schools in Kenya, we take the amount that today is sent to the constituencies, all the money that is sent to the constituencies, and it is divided to all students in boarding school, you'll find that those who are paying the highest, that is 53, they'll even be paying 23. All of them, irrespective of whether they applied or anything, all of them will. And those who are paying less, you'll even find that we'll have some schools which will be having boarding facilities and students will be paying 10,000, 15,000. Which parent seriously cannot set aside 15,000 for his or her student? Or if there is, because we could still have that, then the clans and the villages can still top up with that, and you'll find that even boarding schools may end up being free, just like day school. What use is the bursary if all the applicants win it and all the applicants get the same amount? You find that there is a bursary for certain constituency. Everybody who applies is paid the same amount. Everybody who applies gets the same amount. I've just mentioned about when we were in school that the Board of Governors, today is called Board of Management, Board of Governors would look at what they have and the problems the kids have. They may even have 2 or 3 kids who are poor, and they'll pay everything and remain with something. Or they could have 10 to 15 poor, and then they'll know how to share it out, whatever. But if you look at the bursary, if you go to any constituency, to the notice board, you'll find that the bursaries are paid equally in that constituency. And MCAs have even pushed that they also want to give bursaries. So you find that a parent makes it a plan whereby the student gets bursary from MCA and MP. Why don't we have a centralized place for bursary? In today's rating, a student whose parents are registered voters in Habaswein, that is Wajir South, gets 4 times more than a student whose parents are registered voters in Riruta in Dagoretti South. Yet both were born at Mbagathi Hospital, and both of them went to Kawangware Comprehensive School. You find that in Habaswein or Wajir South, they pay all the school fees. They even buy the school uniform for all the students, so that you'll find that in other places students get school uniforms in Form 1 and Form 3, but in a place like Habaswein, in those remote areas, they pay all the school fees, they pay the school uniform, and still something remains. But you'll find a place like uh, then you'll find a place like urban areas. All students, irrespective of the parents' pocket, all students, irrespective of whatever, they get 5,000 each. Uh, Another thing I wanted to say about bursary, another thing that I wanted to talk about bursary is that it is unconstitutional. You see, this is a kid who is 13 years, 14 or even 15, and maybe the parents have decided not to register as voters. Don't you think you are denying that kid's because the kid is supposed to apply for bursary where the parent is registered as a voter. Now I've completed something about bursary. And I also want to say that whenever Kenya constitutional review is started, it means that the bosses, uh, it is for the bosses, and on a few occasions where the interest of the wananchi is uh, mentioned, it is usually andoano for the fish. You are used uh, to you know the Wadosis will not vote. Okay, they'll vote, but they are few. But since they want your vote, they'll include a few things there which are supposed to a lot of things. I want to say it is the rule of the hand. Your hand has 5 fingers. Now 4 fingers are for ordinary people, but the thumb is meant for the Wadosi. So when they say that we are going to amend it because of A, B, C, D, once the constitution has addressed the issue of the thumb, the other 4 points are forgotten until the next time when they want again to do what? To amend the constitution. Once the interest of the Wadosi has been taken care of, whatever the Wananchi were promised is left. Now, for example, if you are given 4 promises, suppose one was addressed, so long as the Wadosi's interest has been taken care of, the other remaining interest will be ignored. For example, we will be given a lot of good stories. Oh, we want this, but the interest is to introduce the official opposition leader, to have an office, to have staff, to have everything, to have a budget. And it is also they are trying to bring in the prime minister. So long as we have taken care of prime minister and official leader of opposition, I can tell you everything else that had not been addressed to will not be addressed. I will go back to 1966, and you see this thing about changing constitution. Mudavadi himself has been a victim of changing the constitution in the past. And how has he been a victim of it? Let us go back to 1966. 1966, there was a constitution amendment which still stands up to today. Some people say that the new constitution took care of it, but let us say it was still there in 1992. The 1966 constitution amendment was made in such a way that if you are less than 35 years old, you cannot contest for the presidency. In 1992, Jirongo was very powerful. Jirongo was very powerful, and is the one who put the elders, Kina Kamodo, Kina Saitoti, aside. He placed them aside, and the constitution today the constitution says you must mention your running mate. Those years there was no mentioning of your running mate. So Jirongo was pushing for, after the 1992 elections are held, Moi appoints Mudavadi as a vice president. Of course, Moi and Musalia were very close because their relationship was Mujomba and nephew. Because Musalia's stepmother comes from the same area as Moi. So Musalia treated Moi more like a Mujomba, maternal uncle. So Moi had powers. Moi had powers. He could even overlook the constitution if he wanted to. But one of the excuses, I cannot say reason, but one of the excuses that was used to deny Musalia being the vice president in 1992 was that he was 31 years old. He had not yet reached. So you find that the the amendment that was made in 1966 to prevent Tom Mboya, who died in 1969, quite a long time after the whole thing, but still it affected future people. So what Musalia is saying, we may not be there, but it may affect a very good person who would want to lead. So this thing about amending the constitution, we trying to solve a temporary problem, we do not want it. As of now, I'll remind my viewer the saying that Jomo Kenyatta used to like. Jomo Kenyatta used to say in his meeting, used to say, mjinga akierevuka, mwerevu ako mashakani. I say that, and I say that the review could happen in 2029. I recommend that the review, we have the elections, then the review happens in 2029, 2 years later. Kenyans do not trust a president who midway wants to change the constitution. But a president who changes the constitution of Kenya in his second or final term is easier to sell. Even 2027, you re-elect Ruto, and 2029, Ruto starts a constitution amendment, it will go through. But if in 2027 you elect me as the president, and in 2029 I say let us make a constitutional amendment, Kenyans has reached a place where a sitting president cannot. That is when you start hearing people saying, why, is it not the introduction of 7 years instead of 5 years or whatever? But when you make a constitutional amendment which will not affect you but will affect the next president, it is a bit easier that. Because Jomo Kenyatta said, a voter akierevuka, then leadership is in danger. I would believe that one time we may have a genuine case for constitution amendment. But the way our leaders have done it, and the way we even suspect that now he wants to start, like the first time he serves 5 years, and then the second time he serves 7 years. You know, that thing is in the mind of people. So convincing them otherwise, but then political leaders should blame themselves, because once beaten, twice shy. I would want to ask Kenyans, this is 2026, I would ask Kenyans to take a decade of reflection. Let us take a decade of reflection. That is up to 2036, where we chambua all the constitution from the last letter to the first letter to the last letter. Tunachambua kabisa for a decade. Then after a decade, that is 2026, 2036, we make a constitutional amendment. And when we make the constitutional amendment, for those who will be there in 2036, the constitution amendment in 2036 should be made with an idea that it will be implemented in 2047. Why am I saying so? It is good to make a constitution amendment that does not affect those in leadership today. We should make amendments that do not affect. Now, if Ruto is trying to make a constitution amendment which will affect Ruto, then that is not good. But if we have, today is 2026, we have experts looking at each and every paragraph from the 2010 constitution, and we take 10 years reviewing it. After taking 10 years reviewing it, that is 2036. Then those who will be there, in 2036, they make a constitutional amendment which will take place in 2047. Why am I saying so? I want to tell you the story of cooks. If you are cooking food and you are serving it on the table and you're one of the people to eat it, it is quite possible that the lean meat and many pieces of meat, you'll place it on your plate, but bones and whatever you'll place it other people. So if you are told that you are dishing out food and you are not one of the ones to eat, I'm sure you'll dish out equally. So can't we have a situation where we make a constitution for the next generation with a rider that it be implemented when many years from today, as like the like the one I've just given, where we take time and it affects those kids who are being born today. I also want to say politicians have used politics, have used a constitution amendment for their own advancement. You can even see that in 1992, the constitution had said that the president serves 2 terms. Moi went and made sure that he amended it to mean that all the terms that he just added something to say starting from 1992. So he says anybody who has served before 1992, it should not be counted. But if you find that the constitution which was amended in 1992 meant that Moi was even not qualified to be to be a candidate, because he had been a presidential candidate in 1978. He had been a presidential candidate in 1983, 1988. So he had already served 3. So anything that is amended that those who are in office benefit, we would want to say that mjinga akierevuka, mwerevu atafanya nini? Atapata shida. We want to say that if we follow that, then Mr. Use the Constitution of Kenya for political advancement is no more. You'll find that most of the constitution we have been having, it has been targeting a certain individual. Mr. Change the Constitution, he is no longer there. You'll find that in the year 2005 referendum, supposing the 2005 referendum would have gone the banana way, we would not have had the ODM. You know, ODM, there are 2 signs. If you are for the constitution, you checked banana because it looked like a tick. The teacher marks a tick. And orange was chosen because it was a 0, which means rejection. So if banana side would have won the 2005 referendum, I'm very sure ODM as a party would not be there. So we are finding that referendum are being used, especially by Mr. Use the referendum as positive. The 2007 gave Raila a momentum to perform very well in the 2007 general election. If it would have gone the other way, Raila would not have performed as well as he did. Then we had another constitution in the 2010. Ruto side failed. Yes, Ruto headed the no constitution. But it gave him a political momentum that he's still enjoying today. You know, it gave him an opportunity to go throughout the country and tested the ground. And were it not for the 2010 constitution, for your information, a lot of people say Ruto should not do whatever for that because he opposed the 2010 constitution. Ruto did not oppose the 2010 constitution. No. Ruto joined the no team as Sungura Mjanja style. You know, he wanted a bragging right. He said, look at the other side. There is Kibaki, there is Raila, there is whatever. All the heavyweights are on that side. And I am the only heavyweight on this side. And I got 30%. Now, if you get the 70% that all these people... So Ruto was opposing the constitution only for bragging right and also to test drive how to run a nationwide campaign. Coincidentally, maybe very much coincidentally, the Supreme Court rarely sides with the government, with the executive. It is rare for the Supreme Court of Kenya to side with the executive. So today, irrespective of your reasoning, today if you went to the Supreme Court to do anything, it will side with you because you are against the executive. Now let us take the example now. He's saying that we should have a ballot paper specifically for, because somebody would go to court. Don't you think, first of all, people went to court, isn't it? People went to court and Maraga passed and said that the two-third gender is not there, and he ordered the government to disband the parliament. Did it do it? You see, the executive only follows what it wants to follow. Even today, if you go to court and say that the constitution says that boundary delimitations have to happen every 8 to 12 years. Now 12 years as we have a constitutional crisis. I can tell you from the past, the Supreme Court of Kenya will pass and say the country is in a constitutional quagmire. It will say that. And the government will choose the judgment that is pleasant to the executive, it will follow. That is not pleasant. So what we need now is, what do you call, goodwill by everybody concerned. Goodwill by everybody concerned. When we say now we find ourselves here, what do we do? Of course, right now, we cannot have a boundary delimitation, because even the same constitution that says 8 to 12 years, the same constitution says that you cannot do the delimitation when we are just about to sit for the other enemy. Today, if we have to start doing the boundary delimitation, the IEBC will start going around the country. Today we're in January. It will be ready with the new constitutions around September. And then somebody will rush to court and say that September is less than a year to the next election. So it will not be there. So the only thing we can do is that we only hope that somebody doesn't go to court. We do the election the way it is. And again, the question here is, because we have some counties whose census was rejected, Wajir, Mandera, and Garissa, they were rejected. So we still have to have another referendum. This not referendum, census. Now this census will have to happen in 2029. Now if it happens in 2029, then it means in 2030 is when we will have boundary limitation. Any other arrangement, just going around the circle, and we will not finish the cycle.